I shouldn't remember this. Most days blur together for me. Miles of asphalt, cardboard edges biting into my palms, doors that open and close without leaving a mark. But this one stayed. It lodged itself somewhere behind my eyes, where it wakes up every time the world goes quiet, every time I'm alone, every time I hear rain touch glass and pause, like it's waiting for permission. I knew something was wrong before I ever parked the truck. The address was correct. The scanner agreed. The map didn't hesitate. And still, my foot hovered over the brake, like my body was arguing with instructions it didn't trust. The house sat there calmly, politely, doing nothing at all. No movement, no sound, no sign of life. Just a porch, a door, and a light that was off even though it was already dark. I told myself I was tired. I told myself fear looks for excuses when routines crack. I picked up the package anyway. Weight felt wrong in my hands. Not heavy, not light. Just present, like it wanted to be noticed. The rain had started somewhere behind me, not falling so much as tapping. A careful sound. The kind that makes you aware of your breathing. The kind that makes silence feel intentional. I stepped onto the porch. The wood didn't complain. The door didn't move. The house didn't react at all. That's when the porch light flickered on. Not bright, not welcoming, just enough to make sure I was seen. I stood there longer than I ever had on any delivery. Long enough to feel foolish. Long enough to feel watched. Long enough to think about turning back and how strange it would look on a report. Attempted delivery. No contact. Even though I was standing inches from a door that suddenly felt occupied. I knocked. The sound didn't echo. It stopped, like it had hit something soft on the other side. When the door opened, he was already there. Too close. Too ready. Standing in the exact place someone would stand if they'd been listening the entire time. His eyes met mine with a familiarity I hadn't earned. He smiled like he knew how this was supposed to go. And before I could say a word, before I could ask for a name or a signature or even an explanation, he spoke first. He said my name. That was the moment everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough that the night leaned in. Just enough that I understood something I still don't know how to explain. The man was home, and I don't think he was ever supposed to be. After he said my name, the world slid back into place like nothing had happened. That's the part that still bothers me. I laughed it off. A short sound, automatic, the kind you make when your brain needs time to catch up. I told myself he must have read my badge through the window, or overheard it on the radio earlier, or guessed. People guess things all the time. I needed that to be true, so I let it be true. I've always been ordinary. That's what makes this easier to talk about, and harder to explain. I wasn't chasing stories. I wasn't looking for trouble. I worked nights because the roads were quieter, because fewer people meant fewer problems. The routes were predictable. The rules were simple. Deliver. Scan. Move on. Routine keeps you safe. Or at least it convinces you that you are. The outskirts were always my last stretch, where the sidewalks then out, where houses stop competing with each other and start keeping their distance. Yards get wider. Streetlights get fewer. The kind of place where headlights feel intrusive, like you're interrupting something private. That night, the rain glazed the roads until they looked like mirrors. Every streetlight stretched itself across the asphalt, trembling with each drop. My windshield wipers kept time, back and forth, steady enough that I stopped noticing them. The GPS pulsed softly on the dash, recalculating. It did that sometimes out here. Signal lag, tall trees, empty stretches where satellites felt far away. I trusted it anyway. I always did. Trusting systems is easier than trusting instincts, especially when instincts don't come with explanations. The address hadn't stood out when I loaded the truck. It didn't have a history. No repeat stops. No familiar name. That should have been strange, but it wasn't flagged. New residents happen. People move. Houses wake up after long sleeps. Still, as I drove closer, something felt off. Not sharp enough to call fear, just dull and persistent. Like background noise you don't notice until it stops. No neighbors were outside. No cars passed me. No windows watched me from across the street. When I pulled up, the house lights were on. That sounds comforting. It should have been. But they weren't bright. They didn't spill warmth onto the lawn or stretch toward the road. They sat behind the windows, contained, as if the house didn't want to share them. I stayed in the truck for a moment, engine idling, rain ticking against the roof. I remember watching the droplets race each other down the glass, some winning, some disappearing halfway through. I remember thinking how quiet it was for a place that claimed someone was home. This address never had deliveries before, I thought. The sentence arrived fully formed, like I'd read it somewhere already. I shook it off, grabbed the package, opened the door. Cold rushed in immediately, sharper than it should have been. The smell of wet pavement and leaves and something else, something old, faint but present, like dust that never quite settles. The porch light flickered on as soon as my foot touched the first step. I hadn't rung the bell yet. That's when it hit me. The feeling that the place was aware of me. Not curious, not hostile, just attentive. Like I'd crossed an invisible line and something had quietly taken note. I told myself I was projecting. Long shifts do that. Fatigue turns shadows into ideas. I climbed the steps anyway, each one steady, each one refusing to make a sound. Standing there, inches from the door, rain sliding down my jacket, I felt exposed in a way I couldn't name. Like the house knew exactly where I was and had known long before I arrived. Have you ever felt like a place noticed you before you noticed it? The scanner chimed softly in my hand, pulling my attention back to the job. I looked down at the screen, expecting the usual confirmation prompt, the one I could clear without thinking. Instead, a note filled the display, brighter than everything else around it. Hand to recipient only. Do not leave unattended. I stared at it longer than I needed to. That instruction wasn't common out here. Packages got left on porches all the time, tucked behind planters, set beside doors. People trusted distance. People trusted absence. This request felt deliberate, like someone had imagined the moment of exchange and decided it mattered. I glanced back at the house. No car in the driveway. No fresh tire tracks in the gravel. The lawn was trimmed but uneven, like it had been done once and then forgotten. The curtains were drawn tight across every window, not closed casually, pulled until the fabric strained at the rods. No gaps, no corners left careless, just a solid barrier between the inside and the night. Then I noticed the camera. It was mounted above the door, small and dark, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But it wasn't angled toward the yard or the street like most of them are. It pointed straight down, at the exact place where someone would stand to knock. At me. Water had begun to pool along the edge of the porch, collecting in shallow, shifting mirrors. The rain slid off the roof in a steady drip, each drop landing close enough that I could feel the cool spray on my wrists. My boots were already damp. The hem of my pants clung to my ankles. I shifted the package under my arm and reached for the door. The handle turned. I froze. I hadn't knocked yet. The door wasn't just unlocked. It moved easily, like it had been waiting for the pressure of a hand. It opened a few inches on its own, slow and deliberate, releasing a line of warm light across the porch floor. The contrast was immediate. Outside, everything felt muted, wrapped in rain and shadow. Inside, the light was soft and yellow, steady in a way that felt practiced. It touched the edges of the doorway without spilling too far, like it knew its limits. I stood there, heart finally remembering to react, listening. The rain muffled everything beyond the porch. No wind, no distant engines, no night insects. The world had narrowed to the sound of water and my own breathing. From inside the house, there was nothing. No footsteps. No voice. No movement. I knocked anyway. The sound exploded in the quiet, louder than it had any right to be. It echoed through the house, bouncing off unseen walls, lingering longer than a knock should. I waited for it to fade, for something to answer it. Nothing did. I leaned forward slightly, peering through the gap in the door. The entryway was clean, sparse. No shoes by the door, no coats on hooks, just bare walls and a narrow hallway stretching away from the light, darker the farther it went. "Delivery," I called out. My voice sounded wrong in there, too present, like it didn't belong. I checked the scanner again, as if it might have changed its mind. Hand to recipient only. The warmth from inside brushed against my face, my hands. Package itself. It felt inviting in a way that made my skin prickle. Houses shouldn't feel like they're reaching. I told myself this was simple. Someone was home. They'd stepped away. They'd left the door open by accident. People make mistakes. Doors get unlocked. Lights get left on. There was a logical explanation for every piece of it, even if I couldn't line them up properly. Still, I hesitated. The camera above me remained dark. No indicator light. No sign it was recording. And yet, the longer I stood there, the stronger the sense became that I was already being observed. Not through a lens, but through the space itself. The rain pressed closer, creeping across the porch boards, soaking into the cuffs of my jacket. Standing outside felt worse than standing still. The instruction on the screen felt heavier now, less like a guideline and more like a demand. I thought about turning back, about logging the attempt, about getting into the truck and letting the engine noise drown out the silence behind me. The door opened wider. No hand touched it. No shadow crossed the light. Just enough room now for a person to pass through. I should have walked away, but I stepped inside. The warmth followed me in and then stopped at the door, like it didn't care what happened next. Inside, the house smelled old, but not abandoned. There was no rot, no mildew, nothing sharp or decaying. It was the smell of stillness that had been disturbed and then carefully put back, like air that had been sitting in the same shape for a long time. Underneath it, faint and persistent, was something human. Soap, maybe, or clean fabric left too long in a drawer. The door closed behind me. I didn't hear it latch. I just heard the outside disappear. The entryway opened into a living room that felt wider than it needed to be. Furniture sat far apart, angled slightly wrong, as if each piece had been moved once and never corrected. A couch faced the wall instead of the television. A chair sat half-turned toward a corner, like it had been abandoned mid-conversation. Nothing was broken. Nothing was dusty. Everything was just off. There were no photos. I noticed that almost immediately. No frames on the walls. No pictures on shelves or tables. No signs of birthdays, weddings, graduations, vacations. No proof that anyone had ever smiled here or stood still long enough to be remembered. The light fixtures hummed softly above me. The sound blended with the rain still tapping somewhere beyond the walls, distant now, filtered and small. Then I heard footsteps. They came from upstairs. Slow, measured, one step, then another. The sound traveled through the ceiling, clear enough that I could trace the path, across a room, then toward the stairs. I waited. The footsteps stopped. Not at the top of the stairs. Not moving away. Just stopped, like whoever was up there had decided not to finish the thought. Somewhere deeper in the house, a television clicked on. I didn't hear a voice. I heard static, low and constant, the kind that presses against your ears when you realize there's no signal at all. It came from a room I couldn't see, down a hallway that narrowed the farther it went. Tick, tick, tick. A clock on the wall announced itself, louder than it had any right to be. Each second landed hard, like it wanted to be counted. I found myself counting anyway, without meaning to. That's when he appeared. He stepped into the living room from the hallway, already holding a pen. Up close. He looked ordinary in a way that felt intentional. Average height, neutral clothes. Nothing that stood out long enough to describe later. His face carried an expression that Could have been polite if you didn't look too long at it. He smiled, but his eyes didn't settle on mine. They moved around my face instead, like they were checking something off a list. "You can set it there," he said softly, nodding toward a table that was too clean to be useful. His voice was calm, careful, like he was aware of how sound behaved in this house and didn't want to wake it. I placed the package down and lifted the scanner, explaining the signature requirement even though he already knew. He nodded before I finished, the motion small and precise. "I just need a moment," he said. "Don't go yet." I hadn't said I was leaving. He took the scanner, his fingers brushing mine again. This time, I noticed his hand trembling, not violently, just enough to make the pen click lightly against the plastic as he adjusted his grip. "You have a long night," he added, still not looking directly at me. I felt the weight of the house settle around us. The static hissed from the other room. The clock kept counting. Somewhere above us, the upstairs remained silent in a way that felt intentional, like it was listening too. He signed slowly, painfully slowly. Each letter looked deliberate, practiced, as if he'd written it many times before and still didn't quite trust it to stay put. When he finished, he paused, staring at the name he'd written like it might move if he didn't watch it. "You're good at your job," he said. I didn't answer. He handed the scanner back without meeting my eyes. As I took it, he finally looked up, and for a brief moment, his gaze locked onto mine. "You always come when you're supposed to," he said. The words landed wrong. Too complete, too certain. My chest tightened. I thought about the open door behind me, about the rain outside, about how quiet the truck would feel compared to this place. At this point, I wondered, standing there with the package delivered and the signature captured, would you stay, or would you leave? I should have ended it there. Signature captured, package delivered, a clean exit. That's how it's supposed to go. But the moment stretched, thin and delicate, and neither of us moved to break it. He was the one who spoke first. "Do people ever go missing on your routes?" he asked. The question floated between us, light enough to sound curious, heavy enough to land hard. His tone didn't change. Still polite, still soft, like he was asking about the weather, or traffic, or whether the rain would last through the night. I told him no. I told him I hadn't heard of anything like that. He nodded, absorbing the answer without reacting to it, as if the response itself wasn't the important part. "How long?" he continued. "Before someone notices if you don't come back?" The clock kept ticking. The static kept hissing. The house stayed impossibly still. I felt my pulse in my throat now, slow but forceful, like my body was trying to warn me without making a sound. I glanced toward the door, instinctively mapping the distance. It felt farther away than it had a moment ago. "I'm on a schedule," I said. "They'd notice." Another nod. Smaller this time. "That's good," he said. "Some people aren't." As he stepped aside, I saw it. The basement door at the end of the hallway. It wasn't wide open, just cracked enough to notice. Just enough for darkness to press through the gap, like it was waiting its turn. The air near it felt cooler, heavier, carrying a faint smell that didn't belong to the rest of the house. The carpet around the doorway was darker in places, blotchy, uneven, like something had soaked in once and never fully left. I told myself it could be anything. Spilled water, old cleaning solution. 100 ordinary explanations lined up in my head, each one less convincing than the last. Outside, the rain grew louder. I realized then that I couldn't actually hear it directly anymore. The sound reached me softened, distant, like it was happening somewhere else entirely. The walls were too good at their job. The house had sealed itself off from the night. A low hum settled under everything, a vibration I felt more than heard. It wasn't coming from any one place. It felt structural, like the house itself had found a frequency and decided to keep it. I shifted my weight, eager to leave, and that's when I noticed the floor near the door. No shoes, not by the wall, not tucked under a bench, not anywhere. The place was lived in, but not used. Like someone knew how a house should be arranged without actually participating in it. My eyes moved next to a small table near the hallway, empty on top. No keys, no wallet, no mail, No mail at all. No envelopes. No flyers. No stacks waiting to be sorted. Nothing that said time passed here in the way it does everywhere else. My stomach tightened. I glanced back at the table where I'd set the package. Beneath it, stacked neatly against the leg, were other boxes. Same size, same tape, same handwriting. I crouched slightly, just enough to read the labels. Different dates, weeks apart, months maybe, all addressed to this house, all marked delivered. My mouth went dry as the pieces finally lined up in a way I didn't want them to. The routine, the instructions, the way he'd known my name, the way he'd spoken like this moment was expected, rehearsed, patiently awaited. The rain outside surged, pounding harder now, like it was trying to get back in. The hum deepened. The clock kept counting, indifferent and exact. That's when I realized I wasn't the first delivery. The house felt smaller once I knew. Not physically. Nothing had moved. But the air pressed closer, thick with understanding. The warmth that had drawn me in now felt sealed, recycled, like it had been used too many times without ever being let out. I straightened slowly, forcing myself not to stare at the boxes. I didn't want him to know what I'd seen. I didn't want anything about my face to change. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound cut through the room, so sharply that my breath caught. Relief came first, pure, instinctive relief, followed immediately by confusion. There hadn't been any signal issues when I parked. The GPS had struggled, but my phone had been fine. I pulled it out. No bars, no service, just the vibration, still fading against my palm like a memory. Another buzz followed, then another. Notifications without content, calls without connection. The phone trying and failing, over and over, like it knew something was wrong but couldn't reach past the walls to say it. That happens sometimes, the man said gently. I hadn't realized he'd moved. He was closer to the door now, not standing in front of it in any obvious way. Just there, casually positioned, one hand resting against the frame, his body angled like he was making room for me while somehow taking up all of it at the same time. I took a step back instead. My heel brushed against something solid. The basement door. It was open wider now. I don't remember deciding to look. I just remember the moment my eyes adjusted to the dark. The faint light from the hallway slipped down the stairs, enough to outline shapes, enough to show depth, enough to show that the space below was not empty. Packages were stacked along the walls, dozens of them, some new, some old, some yellowed with age, cardboard softened by time and damp air, labels peeling, corners crushed, names visible in the glow, different names, different handwriting, different dates. None of them opened. They were arranged carefully, neatly, like someone cared about them staying intact. The hum deepened, sinking now with the slow, heavy thud in my chest. I could hear my own heartbeat, or maybe I was just feeling it. The sound bleeding into the floor, into the walls, into the space between seconds. I don't go down there, the man said, almost apologetically. Not until it's finished. I turned back to him. His expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still measured, but his eyes were sharper now, more focused, like he was finally looking at me instead of the idea of me. They always come alone, he continued. That part never changes. I opened my mouth to speak and realized I didn't know what words would do anymore. Logic had no traction here. Threats felt childish. Silence felt dangerous. I should leave, I said finally. He smiled, smaller than before. You're right on time. The sound dropped out. Not gradually, not gently. The static from the television vanished. The clock stopped ticking. Even the hum receded until there was nothing left but the rain striking the house and the low, rhythmic pulse beneath it, slow, steady, unmistakably alive. He stepped toward the table and picked up the scanner. My scanner. I watched, detached and horrified, as he turned it in his hands like an object he was already familiar with. His fingers moved with confidence, comfort. He didn't ask for permission. You do good work, he said again. You always have. The screen glowed as he signed, but he didn't write his name. He wrote mine. First, Last, perfectly spaced, perfectly shaped. The letters flowed without hesitation, like muscle memory, like practice, like he'd done it before many times, without ever needing to look. I couldn't breathe. The signature looked exactly like mine. When he handed the scanner back, our fingers didn't touch this time. He didn't need them to. The exchange felt ceremonial, final, like the last step of something set in motion long before either of us had arrived at this moment. I thought about the packages below, about the names on the labels, about routes that quietly ended, about systems that marked things complete and moved on. And I wondered, do you think he planned this? Or was it something else using him? The moment his pen lifted from the screen, the house seemed to exhale. The glow of the scanner dimmed, and in that brief dip of light my eyes were pulled back to the basement, to the stacks of boxes, to the way they filled the space, not like clutter, but like inventory. Untouched, preserved, waiting. My phone buzzed again, harder this time. I yanked it out, thumb shaking as I woke the screen. A missed call. No number, no voicemail, still no signal. Just the dull certainty that something was trying to reach me and couldn't get through the walls. That won't work in here, the man said. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't stepped closer. He didn't need to. He was standing in the doorway now, not blocking it outright, just leaning there, one arm against the frame, posture relaxed. The kind of stance someone takes when they're settling in for a conversation, when they're confident there's no rush. They always come alone, he said, almost fondly. That part matters. The rain outside surged, louder than before, hammering the roof like it was trying to break in. Beneath it, that low, steady thump returned, slow and deep, matching the rhythm in my chest. I couldn't tell where the sound ended, and I began. "You're right on time," he added. The words hit harder now, loaded with context I didn't want. He held the scanner up between us, tilting it so I could see the signature clearly. My full name stared back at me, clean and confident. No hesitation in the lines. No uneven pressure. It looked like something written by a hand that had practiced it, over and over. I thought of the boxes downstairs, of dates stretching back further than my employment record, of routes that ended quietly, filed away as completed, resolved. Do you think he planned this, or was it something else using him? The thought didn't have time to settle. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough that the walls shuddered, close enough that the lights flickered. The sound tore through the house, violent and sudden, breaking the careful stillness like glass. I reacted before I could think. I knocked the scanner out of his hand. It hit the floor and skidded across the wood, clattering loud and sharp. For the first time, his expression changed. Not anger, not fear, just surprise. A small crack in the certainty. I ran. The thunder was still rolling as I hit the door, yanking it open with more force than I thought I had. Rain slammed into me instantly, cold and blinding, soaking through my clothes in seconds. I didn't look back. I didn't listen for footsteps. I didn't care if he followed. I tore down the steps, boots slipping on wet wood, lungs burning as I crossed the yard. The truck never looked so far away. I fumbled with the door, hands numb, rain plastering my hair to my face. Another crack of thunder swallowed everything as I threw myself inside and slammed the door shut. I drove without thinking, without checking mirrors, without slowing down until the house was gone, the road stretching empty and dark ahead of me, like nothing had ever been there at all. I reported it, every detail, the man, the questions, the basement, the packages. I watched the dispatcher's expression change as I spoke, watched skepticism give way to something tighter, more careful. Officers were sent. Lights flashed in the rain. Statements were taken. They went to the address before dawn. The house was empty. No furniture. No boxes. No stains. No basement full of unopened deliveries. The place was clean. Too clean. Like it had been reset. No one nearby had seen a man. No one remembered lights being on. The porch camera didn't exist. The door locked properly. The record showed a vacant property. Except for one thing. The house still receives packages. Same address. Same instructions. Hand to recipient only. I don't work nights anymore. I don't deliver to the outskirts. I don't ignore that feeling when a place feels too aware of me. Sometimes, though, when the rain starts softly, when it sounds like fingers tapping on glass, I think about that house, about who signed for those packages, about where the other drivers went, about why it only happens at night, why it only works when someone is alone. Sometimes I wonder if the house is waiting, and if the man was ever really there at all. Was he human, or just the last thing left inside that house? This isn't the only delivery that ended in silence. Next time, I'll tell you about a house that only appears on GPS after midnight. If this story followed you into the dark, if it stayed with you longer than it should have, long after the rain outside stopped sounding like rain, then you already understand why I'm telling it. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you have gone inside or left the package at the door? Because somewhere out there, a porch light is still flickering, a scanner is still waiting for a signature, and the house is still expecting someone to arrive alone. The rain softens, thins out, fades into memory. Then, far away, a single door closes,